In this video, I'm gonna show you guys how to permanently restore yellowed, hazed up, foggy, and oxidized headlights. Now let's get straight into it. What's up YouTube? Welcome to the Wilson Auto Detailing YouTube channel. My name is Luke Wilson. Now the subject of today's video is headlight restoration, how to do it. I'm gonna show you guys my exact process in how to literally permanently restore headlights. Now let me show you guys the headlights that I am working on right now. So there you go. You can definitely see all this hazing, all this yellowing, all this oxidation on both of the headlights. It's pretty severe, and so it's gonna be kind of a job, a little bit longer job than kind of the average would be. So as far as restoring headlights go, you have all these headlight restoration kits that you can buy from these retail stores, but the fact of it is those things are not gonna work, especially on oxidized headlights like these. You have to use a process called wet sanding, and literally what wet sanding is you're taking wet sandpaper and some sort of lubricant or water, and you are sanding the clear coat on these headlights down. So that brings up the first point, that the first reason that headlights even react this way and kind of cause this kind of fading and stuff is because manufacturers manufacture the headlights with a clear coat on the front to kind of protect the underlying plastic. Well, that clear coat, when it's not washed, when it's not cleaned, when it's not waxed, it's not maintained, the clear coat, just like it would on your car, it degrades. And as it degrades, it creates this yellowing, sort of really awful looking thing, and it makes your headlights look terrible. So what you have to do is wet sand. Now I'm gonna take 60 seconds and just do a quick summary of what wet sanding is. Wet sanding is basically just like polishing on steroids, in that you take imperfections in the paint or in headlights or whatever, and you actually sand down whatever surface you're working on. You sand it down so those imperfections are no longer there, because think about it, if you have a scratch in the clear coat, well, you sand the surrounding clear coat down to the bottommost part of that scratch, and then you polish out those sanding marks. So that scratch is no longer there. You're not actually filling in the scratch, you're just removing the surrounding clear coat until you get to the bottom of that scratch, and that's how the scratch disappears or goes away, whatever. Well, I'm gonna sand off the clear coat on these headlights. That's the only way to fix them, is to actually completely remove the clear coat that exists on top of these headlights completely, and then I'm gonna go higher and higher. I'm gonna use 800 grit sandpaper first. So that's a heavier grit. It's got more of a bite to it. It's gonna sand that clear coat layer off. Then after my 800 grit has completely sanded the clear coat off, I'm gonna go to about 1500 grit, which is it's not gonna take any more of the clear coat off, because my 800 grit took all the clear coat off, but my 1500 is just going to make those sanding marks smaller. And then I'm gonna go to my 2000, and it's gonna make those sanding marks even smaller. And then after the 2000, I'm gonna take my DA polisher, and I'm just gonna polish those really, really tiny, minuscule sanding marks away. And that's how you completely restore headlights. So let's get right into it. Let me show you guys my process. So obviously I lifted the hood and I taped off the surrounding paint that's around the headlight, because if I'm taking my sandpaper and I'm sanding up and down like this, well, I want to make sure to tape off this paint that exists around the headlight so that I'm not getting any of these sanding marks on the paint, right? So I want to keep the paint and make sure I'm like managing my risk here. So I taped it off, lifted the hood so that I can make sure I get even the topmost part of the headlight. And now all I'm gonna do is literally take, this is just my Optimum No Rinse solution with distilled water. You can use a hose, you can use tap water, it really doesn't matter. And I'm just gonna wet my sandpaper just like this, and then I'm going to wet the headlight just like that, and literally just start sanding. Now I'm gonna sand up and down, and it's important that you don't necessarily have to sand in one direction at the first start when you're just taking the clear coat off, but as you go to polish, you wanna make sure that your sanding marks are going all in one direction. It's gonna make it much easier and much quicker to polish out those sanding marks. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start sanding up and down just like this. So you can see this kind of nasty film that starts to come, and what that is the clear coat that's being sanded off and it's being wetted. So this is just wet, sanded clear coat. Now, the reason why you have to wet sand is because as this clear coat is removed, it can gunk up the sandpaper that you're using. So you want to constantly be wetting the headlight just like this, so that that removed clear coat can go ahead and fall off the paint so that it doesn't get in the way of your sanding that you're doing. You want the clear coat to constantly kind of be falling through the sandpaper. So ideally, you would have a constant flow of water as you're sanding, but it's not necessarily something that's absolutely necessary. So all that is just the clear coat that's being sanded off. Now I'm gonna go ahead and continue and sand off this whole layer of the clear coat with my 800 grit sandpaper. Now every now and again, what I want to do is, because this clear coat kind of hinders my ability, because it's being sanded off, it kind of hinders my ability to be able to like see the plastic. I want to kind of rinse it off, dry it off with my microfiber towel, and then I want to see if there's any more clear coat left to be sanded. And I'll show you guys how you can tell. All right, so you can see that a bunch of this headlight, now that I've sanded just a little bit, a lot of it is very like milky, cloudy, but there are parts of it like right up here that are still clear, a little bit shiny, like right down here. In the corners especially, that'll happen because naturally you kind of sand this more than you sand the corners. So you see these clear parts. Any part that is still clear is part where the clear coat still is there. And so you want to stop every now and again, dry it off so that you can see kind of your progress. So this looks pretty good, but you want the entire headlight to look exactly like this white milky substance. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this corner, this corner, this corner a little bit more, and hit the whole thing a little bit more, and I'll take you guys in for the look after I've gotten done with the 800 grit. Okay, so now this is what it looks like when it's totally milky. Now these little tiny spots right here, that's just water, it's just drying. But you can see that there's no spots that are like clear anymore. Once again, that's just drying. But there's no spots that are clear anymore. It's just a totally like foggy headlight. So the 800 grit sandpaper has totally removed the clear coat. So what I'm gonna do now is simply just take my 1500 grit sandpaper, and what I'm gonna do is go in an up and down motion, because when I was sanding it with the 800, it's totally taken off the clear coat, but I didn't go in like a uniform scratch pattern. I just kind of went all over the place because I was just really trying to get, you know, anything. Like when you're down in these corners, it's difficult to like do up and down, right? Because you're trying to get these little tiny pieces. And so anyways, I don't have a uniform scratch pattern right now. So when I take my 1500 grit, I'm gonna go up and down just like this. So not only am I gonna just kind of minimize, I'm gonna make those scratches even finer and finer, but I'm gonna put a uniform scratch pattern into this. So now this is the after of the 1500 grit. So it's getting clearer and clearer. You can see, like, it might be difficult to see, it's still very milky, still foggy, but the scratches are getting finer and finer. So as you go up in the grit level of your sandpaper, the plastic will get clearer and clearer. So this is 1500 grit finish, and then here's 800 grit finish. So I already finished this with 800 grit, but you can see that it's definitely more cloudy and milky. And of course I'm live on location, so that noise is a lawnmower next door. Now I'm gonna go ahead and finish this right one that I'm doing with 2000 grit, and then I'm gonna come show you guys how it's a little bit more clear and the scratches are even finer. Okay, so here is the 2000 grit finished sanded headlight. So you can see it's still drying a little bit, but you can see it's definitely still milky and foggy, but it's much more clear. So there's 2000 grit finish, and then here's 800 grit finish. So you can tell, obviously, the sanding, you know, it makes it clearer, right? It's very, very apparent. Now, what you'll find when you get to like the highest like grit level, like 2000 and 3000, is that the sandpaper really bites. It's like very gritty when you're sanding off the clear coat, like with 800 grit. But when you get up to 2000, that bite really kind of stops because you're not sanding anything off anymore. You're just making a more uniform and finer scratch pattern. So the 2000 almost feels like you're just rubbing paper against like plastic. It doesn't feel like it's doing anything, but it is making those scratches finer and finer. Now here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my DA Griot's Garage 6-inch random orbital polisher, and I am going to use Meguiar's 105, and I'm gonna polish out these sanding marks. Now you guys can see that I'm letting the polisher like do its job. I'm not putting a bunch of pressure, because one thing you need to be careful of is the fact that the buffer like shakes the plastic, and you don't want to shake and rattle these lights inside so much where you damage something. So I'm letting the buffer do its job. I'm letting the polish cut. I'm not putting a bunch of pressure. So here's the first pass, and I'll zoom in a little bit. You guys can see, obviously, much better, but I'm gonna go ahead and do a second pass because there's certain things like in these corners here that are still a little bit foggy, still a little bit scratchy. So you're gonna do one pass probably over the kind of the general area, and then you're gonna have to get more detailed up in these areas. Boom, there is the finished headlight, polished, sanded, waxed, everything. Here's the other one, and you can see here's a before picture right here. And so you guys can see that this thing is just totally restored, really looks absolutely awesome. So that is how you restore headlights: sanding, polishing, and waxing just to protect them at the end. Guys, I will definitely put a link in the description box to the Griot's Garage 6-inch dual action random orbital polisher. I'll put a link to the 800 grit sandpaper. I'll put a link to the 1000 grit, 1500, 2000, and I'll put a link to 3000. But anyways, and I'll put a link to this pad, which is the Chemical Guys Hexalogic Heavy Cutting Yellow Pad. Now guys, I can't say enough about this polisher. Once again, I'll make a review video about it, but it's just, if you don't have it, you're doing yourself a disfavor. So don't be afraid to use my links below. Purchase this, any of the sandpaper. I'll also put Meguiar's 105 polish down there as well. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and it helped you, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or video ideas, make sure to link those up in the comments section below. And of course, if you're new here, then first of all, welcome to the Wilson Auto Detailing community, but also make sure that you consider subscribing because I come out with daily videos just like this for the professional detailers and for the car enthusiasts on products, tools, strategies to use, but also things like communication skills, business skills, and so much more. So if you're new, definitely consider subscribing. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. And once again, from Luke Wilson here at Wilson Auto Detailing, I'll see you guys in the next video.